Let's go. What a win that was for Duke basketball. They knock off the Auburn Tigers. A big time win for the Blue Devils at home.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome on into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. Thanks for being here with us today. What a win it was for Duke over the Auburn Tigers last night as the Blue Devils pick up a marquee win. The number 2 team in the country in Auburn goes down on Duke's home floor as they improved to now 6-2 on the season and finished that tough non-conference stretch to begin the year with a 2-2 mark with wins over Arizona and Auburn, losses against Kansas and Kentucky. Big time win for the Blue Devils, and we're here to break it all down with our good pal Kevin Connelly, the site expert from Durham. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcast. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Please like this video if you're watching it on YouTube where you can see the show each and every day. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share the work, share the shows with your friends as we appreciate all the support. Duke wins this one 84-78 over the Auburn Tigers in what is just a marquee basketball game. Out of the gates early, Auburn's got a 13-2 lead, and Duke did not back down. Once again, got to figure out a way to not fall behind so quickly early on. But Duke found a way to keep fighting. Isaiah Evans, big-time playmaker in the first half, making 6 threes, 18 points in the first half of play after scoring just 29 total on the season. What an X factor he was. Cooper Flagg lived up to the billing. He starred for the Duke basketball team, and what an effort from Malik Brown against Johni Broome, an All-American, who if you're watching that basketball game, you can't help but be impressed out of what you saw from Johni Broome and Auburn. You clearly could see why these two teams are considered title favorites among a few other teams in the sport. Massive, massive victory for the Duke basketball team. Can you tell we're excited about it as we've got Kevin here with us on the show today as well? What a win that was for our Duke Blue Devils, Kev.
Yeah, it was, JJ. That was a really big-time win and a win it feels like Duke had to have. I know it was only a game played on December 4th, but given the loss against Kentucky and Kansas, and you win against Arizona, but they have not proven to be that quality of a team at this point in the season. It felt like you had to have this one, and especially for how bad the ACC has been as well. It feels like this was a game that you needed to really bolster your resume come February and March, and it was a Duke team that buckled down after a really bad start and started playing a lot better, and they got it done.
Yeah, next up for Duke, they'll play Louisville. It's their first ACC game of the season. Quickly, the SEC ACC Challenge has concluded. The SEC in the 16 matchups won 14 of them. My goodness, just Duke and Clemson, the only victorious ones. We can have more thoughts on that a little bit later as the show moves on. But we talk about this Duke team in particular. I think we start with the first half and Isaiah Evans' effort to keep Duke in it. Going into this game, throughout the last few weeks, people have been begging for more Isaiah Evans playing time. You and I have been chief among them. We've got shows earlier this week where we're asking, is it slim time? Man, he was ready. Man, he was the shot in the arm that Duke needed. Because give Auburn credit, they have not played in many games like that. And for this basketball team to come out and not be fearful, and a big shout out to the Auburn Tigers fans all the way from Alabama who traveled well, a large contingent of blue and orange there inside Cameron Indoor. Duke didn't back down, and it was a big shot in the arm that they got from Isaiah Evans.
No, they didn't back down, and I think it was a little bit different when you look at the start against Kansas and you look at the start against Auburn. Against Kansas, it looked more like boys versus men out there, and Duke was a little bit surprised by the physicality and the toughness that Kansas kind of brought to them. With this, I don't think it was that. I think it was just Auburn playing phenomenally, and kind of they continued that for most of the game. It was kind of like the Auburn that you saw against Houston earlier in the season, and the same Auburn you saw really from the second half on in the Maui Invitational after their first game against Iowa State. That was the Auburn you saw in those opening 4 minutes. And Duke was able to settle down. And as you mentioned, Isaiah Evans, I think a lot of people have been talking about it. You want to see what he can do. And we hadn't seen that because you're going to take the minutes he gets with a grain of salt against these mid-major teams. You didn't see him against Kentucky. You didn't see him against Arizona. You didn't see him against Kansas. And you're hoping to see him here against Auburn, but never in anyone's wildest dreams do you have him hitting 6 3-pointers in the first half. And that was really the catalyst in getting Duke back in the game and eventually taking a lead into halftime.
In a variety of different setups, right? Many of the threes were in catch and shoot scenarios, but a couple of them were coming off screens, right? Where all of a sudden he's not even square to the basket before he's able to fire it up and knock him down. A couple of times he starts to drive, dump it off to Malik Brown or Connelly, relocate, catch, shoot, knock it down. That was such a positive thing to see for Isaiah Evans, and not being afraid of the moment. As they talked about, this is a certified bucket getter. He's a state of North Carolina just scoring legend in so many ways. He has the most points in a playoff game in North Carolina State high school basketball history, and he was out there getting buckets in the first half for the Duke team. In the second half, he didn't get as much run, and that certainly was something that I don't think we expected to see after the hot start that he had. And I believe if we look at the numbers a little bit further as well, he didn't really take a shot. He had 1 2-point attempt in the entire game. It came in the second half, and that was really one of the few times he even touched the basketball, Kevin, in that second half. He couldn't find it.
Yeah, it was confusing, I think, how he was utilized in that second half. I mean, kind of going back to what you said on him, I think everybody knew coming into his freshman year he could score, right? He was built as a scorer. And kind of what we all were assuming why he didn't get in those previous 3 big games was because of his defense. But I didn't think his defense was that big of a negative in watching his minutes against Auburn. Now, obviously, you could look at that and say, well, yeah, you're not really going to pay that much attention to his defense when he's hitting 3-pointers. Doesn't matter if you're the worst defender in the world. If you're going out there and hitting 6 3-pointers in a half, you're going to play. But still, I don't think his defense was that bad. I thought he brought a spark. I thought he brought energy. I thought he brought hustle. Even in that second half, when you look at the play towards the end, when there was that dust up with Barker Mazzara and Evans after the missed free throw, he was one of the first ones on the floor. And again, I'm a little confused as to why he didn't play that much in the second half when you got a guy that has hit 6 3-pointers in the first half. I mean, I'm thinking you want to get him in the first 4 minutes. I don't think he checked in until about the 13-minute mark in the second half when 7 minutes had already elapsed by. And as you mentioned, he had that one off-handed left-hand floater and it didn't go. And I think that was the only shot he took in the second half. You got to find a way to get him the basketball a little bit more. Obviously, he was now on Auburn's radar. I don't know how much Bruce Pearl spent on a scouting report on Isaiah Evans when he had not played in Duke's previous 3 big games. But yeah, I think he's definitely had to find a way to get him the ball a little bit more in that second half.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, 7 games on the year so far. Isaiah Evans had only played in 4 of them, 29 total points. He scores 18 of them in the first half. Big time for him to step up like that. A big reason why Duke was able to win this game. They had a 7-point lead at halftime. They ultimately win this game by 6. Credit to Isaiah Evans for what he brought this Duke team in the first half to put them in position to win this game. Beyond Isaiah Evans, Cooper Flagg once again steps up and delivers for the Duke team. You can nitpick some of the efficiency numbers that are out there. I'm still not impressed by the outside shooting numbers. Really hopeful that that will turn around and continue. But again, rebounding the basketball, being able to defend multiple positions and set his teammates up as the ball handler, as the screener. There are just so many different things that Cooper Flagg is able to do for this team. And some of the 2-point mid-range jumpers that he was making today, silly for him to have that type of footwork even as large of a player as he is.
Well, that's the Cooper Flagg that everyone talked about in the summer with USA basketball and playing with the Olympic team or playing on the select team, playing against the Olympic team. Everyone knew how good he was in the mid-range and then down low in the post with his footwork. The big question was his shooting, and we talked about a couple of weeks ago what's one thing that really has to improve for Duke, and it's Cooper Flagg's shooting because he becomes a little bit easier to defend, if you can even say that, for given how good he is in the mid-range. But he's certainly proven now he's a second-half player. We saw it against Kansas and Arizona, and now again tonight. Now, yes, the 2 big blemishes on his mark are the turnovers at the end of Kentucky and at the end of Kansas. But you even saw it tonight. Duke is still going to go to him down the stretch to come up with big baskets, and even putting him at the free throw line to help ice the game. Duke is still going to put the ball in his hands late in these close games.
Unbelievable win for Duke. So many other things to talk about in this game. We saw that starting lineup change that many people were wanting to see. I thought Sion James and Caleb Foster both were excellent for this game. Malik Brown, my word, what a player this guy is for Duke and what he means. Tyrese Proctor, unbelievable. And we got to dive into more of the box score as we continue here in just a moment on this episode of Locked On Blue Devils. We're back in just a moment. Okay, Locked On Blue Devils today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. We've got a great Thursday night football game tonight. I've been loving it. It feels like we've had amazing division matchups as of late on Thursday night. The Packers are at the Lions tonight. The Lions favored by 3, according to our friends over at FanDuel. If you're watching the game tonight, you get the hunch in the middle of it. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel. It's an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Big time win for Duke as they defeat the Auburn Tigers. Duke is now 6-2 on the season. Next game up is ACC play against the Louisville Cardinals. That'll be a road contest for Duke, but we're talking more about this game that Duke had against Auburn and a starting lineup change with Sion James being inserted into this one in place of Caleb Foster. And I thought it worked, Kevin, for whatever reason. I thought the switch up, despite the fact we say this, and Auburn got out to that 13-2 lead. But, man, Sion James is just such a pivotal player. And I loved that Caleb Foster was still efficient when he came in, wasn't thrown off at all by being kind of like demoted. It's not the right word to say here because he still played so much for this Duke team. But, you know, there's something to be said for being a starter of a team. It didn't affect him in any way. I thought both those guys were effective in the win.
Yeah, you know, I kind of thought the starting lineup change was going to come against Seattle on Friday night, coming off that loss to Kansas. It didn't happen. Caleb Foster stayed in the starting lineup, but you kind of felt it coming along at some point down the road. And especially with Foster not playing, I think it was close to the final 13 minutes in that game against Kansas. And kind of you look to the same thing tonight. I thought Caleb Foster played a really good first half. I mean, he finished with 9 points, 3 of 5 shooting. And then in the second half, I didn't think he was bad, but I mean, he really didn't play the last 10 and a half minutes. He came in at the end when Duke was trying to get their best free throw shooters out there. So I still have questions about Caleb Foster and his role on this team, considering kind of the size, the strength, the toughness, the veteran leadership that a Sion James provides when he's on the floor. So yeah, I thought Caleb Foster played well, but you look up and he did get into the game for 20 minutes, but again, did not play the final 10:45 of this game until the last couple of seconds.
4 guys in double figures scoring for Duke. Proctor, Flagg, Foster was one of them with 11. And then Isaiah Evans had the 18 that we talked about. Sion James had 9 for the Duke team. Do want to talk about Malik Brown as well with what he was able to do. He had 4 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist. And you look at his numbers even beyond that, man, with what he was able to do, making it so difficult for Johni Broome, particularly in that first half, to give Duke kind of that 7-point separation at the break. Bruce Pearl and his coaching staff did a great job in the second half, involving Johni Broome a little bit more in the pick and roll, and he started to go a little bit. And then Duke would just bring Malik Brown back in and kind of just make life way more difficult for the All-American, who, again, is one of the best players in the entire sport.
Yeah, when you look at how Malik Brown plays, I don't think – I mean, there are stats to back it up, but last year when he was at Syracuse, I don't think he was as valued that much. Now, I know Syracuse didn't play as much 2-3 zone last year as they did under Jim Boeheim, but I still think for a Syracuse team that's not that great and still incorporates some 2-3 zone in their defense, you don't really recognize a player like Malik Brown. I think now through a month of a season, you realize how valuable he is defensively, and he's a player that Duke has not had in a very long time. Undersized, but does not play like it on the floor. Saw how good he was against a player like Hunter Dickinson and Kansas' talented front court, and the same thing here against probably the favorite for the National Player of the Year award right now in Janai Broome. Still finished with 20 points, but Malik Brown made life very difficult down low for this Auburn front court.
Duke just 4 turnovers on the game. I thought that was big as well. Auburn does get out to the big 13-2 lead. Duke comes back. They get out to a 13-point lead in the second half themselves, but then Auburn's able to fight back and get back into it. And a couple of different times, it was cut to a 2-point game. Duke kept taking care of the basketball, kept getting some shots up on their possessions where they shot 50% from the floor, 41% from three-point range. And Tyrese Proctor knocked down just 2 big-time threes. Both of them separated it from a 2-point game to a 5-point game for Duke. And one in particular in the final 3 minutes on a loose ball where it feels like it's going to be either a turnover or a shot or live ball turnover or a shot clock violation of some sorts. He's able to shoot a deep one and hit that one to go.
Well, yeah, that was the biggest shot of the game, right? 4:30 to go in the second half. Auburn's back within 2, and then Tyrese Proctor steps up and hits that deep three-pointer as the shot clock is set to expire, puts Duke back up 73-68, and Auburn never got it back down to one possession after that. So that was the shot of the game, and it comes from a captain, a veteran, a leader in Tyrese Proctor. And kind of when you look at his game overall, finishes with 12 points, didn't have his best first half shooting the basketball. It was just 1 of 6, but in the second half, he comes with 8 points, 3 of 4 shooting, 2 3-pointers. And like I mentioned, that one is really the shot of the game. And then he hits another one with about 3 minutes to go. That was a 2-pointer that pushed the lead back to 7 after Auburn got it down to 5. So, yeah, I think Tyrese Proctor, specifically that 3-pointer, that was the sequence, the play, and the shot of the game.
Last 2 notes that stand out to me looking at this box score. We mentioned just 4 turnovers for Duke. Auburn themselves did a nice job taking care of it too, just 8 turnovers on their end. But Auburn ended up out-rebounding Duke despite having a bit of a deficit at halftime. They end up winning the rebounding battle 39-34. And then the other stat that's really jumping out to me, and you can see all these if you're watching us on YouTube. We've got the box score here posted. How about Duke? A 16-0 advantage on fast break points. That had been something Duke had struggled with in a couple of their games already this season. I'm having flashbacks right now, Kevin, of Kansas out and running in the floor, getting a lot of open looks. 0 fast break points for what is the number 1 offense in the entire country, according to Kim Palm and Auburn.
Well, yeah, but that all ties back into only having 4 turnovers. So if you're not giving turnovers and they're not live ball turnovers, Auburn can't get out and run. You can only run so much on a made basket. So I think valuing the basketball was such a big key for Duke, and they did a great job of it with only 4 turnovers. It did not let Auburn get out and run. And with all this being said and how well Duke played, they still overcame some major free throw line issues, something you just cannot do against a really good team on your home floor, missing 10 free throws. But when it came down to the final 2 minutes, they were able to step to the line, hit a couple of big free throws. Cooper Flagg hitting a pair, Connelly closing it out as well. So free throw line was a major issue for Duke tonight, only going 17 of 27. But late in the second half, they were able to step up there and put this game on ice.
What a win it is for Duke, as they're now 6-2 on the season. They're getting set for their first ACC game against Louisville. We'll talk about that. We've got a couple of more things to discuss with this win over Auburn and much more after we take one more break here on this brand new episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Want to say thank you again so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen or your first watch here on today's show. Make sure after this you go and you check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs keep it real. They bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. A little bit later today, we'll be releasing our latest episode of the Locked On ACC Squad. We touch a lot on that final week of the football season, 9-3 are the Duke Blue Devils. What are the college football playoff scenarios and so much more. So make sure you go check out Locked On ACC here on today's show. All right, here we go. We keep going on the program as I've got Kevin Connelly with us. We're talking about the win for Duke last night as they defeat the Auburn Tigers. It is one of only 2 wins that the ACC had in the ACC and SEC Challenge. And the Blue Devils, mighty strong showing with what they were able to do. And this one, just a gutsy win, means a lot considering what they've been through. And, if we were to look at a couple of other things, it's a game in which Common Malawach is not much of a factor at all on the interior for Duke. Con Knipple takes just 3 shots. That was a big storyline going into this one, Kevin, right? Because in the 2 big games already that Duke lost, he was 1 of 16 from 3-point range. Now all of a sudden, Con just took 3 shots.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, especially in the first half, had to do with Isaiah Evans getting hot and making those 6 3-pointers. But I will give Con credit. He made the one big shot down the end inside the final minute and a half, and then stepped to the free throw line a couple of times to knock 2 big shots down in the final 30 seconds. So obviously his stats aren't really going to pop off the page at you. They might pop off the page in the wrong way, saying he only took 3 shots and only had 6 points, but 4 of those points came in clutch time for Duke to close out the win. And just going back to Cooper Flagg and kind of how we said he's a second half player, you just look at the numbers. I mean, go back to the the Arizona game as well. And then obviously here against Auburn, 2 of 8 in the first half, but then able to find a way to go 5 of 10 in the second half. And obviously there are still, in my opinion, I know a lot of people share this opinion as well. I'm sure some at the next level have concerns about his 3-point shooting, and you're hoping that somehow comes along throughout this season. 0 of 4 again tonight, but just a really gritty player. He wins, man. That's what he does. That's kind of what he's done his entire career, going from AAU to high school and to college. And I know losing 2 games in the first month of the season is not normal for him, but man, he is a special player once he can get it going.
Yeah, 84-78 the final score. We've got the full player box score from the Duke side of things here. So 22 points, 16 of them in the second half for Flagg, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, 3 steals, 37 minutes. He only sat for 3 minutes in this game. Dan Schulman, the play-by-play announcer for ESPN, is kind of reading these stats off to Jay Billis, and he's basically joking, like, is that all? Like, what else is there for Cooper Flagg to do? He's literally doing everything for Duke, and it means so much for him to be just 17 years old doing this and on a big stage. I mean, that's one of the reasons why he wanted to come to Duke, to win a game like this, and the hope is that you can carry over a performance like this into March and into the games in which it matters, where the rotation is going to have ebbs and flows, I would imagine, throughout the year. Here's a game in which Mason Gillis only plays 5 minutes for Duke. It's Isaiah Evans who's taking those minutes. So Evans taking the minutes doesn't mean that Gillis is still out there getting his run, right? It still feels like 7 or 8 guys are going to be the impactful ones for this Duke team with Cooper Flagg leading the way.
Yeah, and that's left on the shoulders of the coaching staff, finding that right combination of guys who are out there. I think a lot of people wanted to see more Isaiah Evans and maybe less of Mason Gillis, and they got their wish here tonight. And Isaiah Evans, I think it's unreasonable to expect him to hit 6 3-pointers every time he's out there on the floor. But certainly he provides a spark that I think this team needs, and an energy that this team needs. And again, he could be a really solid player off the bench. And considering how much attention a player like Cooper Flagg draws, I think maybe we haven't seen it as much this year of how good of a facilitator he is and how he can see the floor. I'm pretty sure he did have an assist on one of those Isaiah Evans threes when he kind of just fired a pass in the corner. I'm pretty sure he made that one. And you see it right there. He sees the floor so well. So if Isaiah Evans can continue to emerge and be this knockdown shooter off the bench, it's just only going to enhance Cooper Flagg's game.
I can't wait to see how this team responds now off the win, right? We keep talking, how do you respond from a loss? And Duke, of course, the last 2 losses have had some of the lesser tier opponents in the sport come up with Wofford and Seattle. Now they've got this big win over Auburn. And now we get set for this weekend where ACC play opens up. And boy, it's kind of hard to talk about expectations within the league, Kevin, knowing that, Duke was picked as the favorites in the ACC. The Tar Heels right there in second, they lost to Alabama last night. UNC's now got 4 losses. It was 14-2 in favor of the SEC over the ACC. So got to make sure you take care of business within the conference now. If you're Duke, you don't have much time to kind of fumble around with many of these games because of how the league's going to view. And we know that winning a national championship, which is what this Duke program is measured on year after year after year, is much easier the higher the seed you are.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason why this game was so important. And when go back to last Monday when the initial net rankings came out, of the power conferences, the ACC had an average net that was last. The SEC was first, then it was the Big Ten, then it was the Big East, and then it was the ACC. And the ACC, I think, was over 10 spots on average lower than the Big East. And
Crazy.
obviously they did not do themselves any favors over these last 2 days against the SEC. And kind of when you look at things, I mean,
so many of the games weren't competitive, Kevin. I don't mean to cut you off, but I mean, it was
Yeah.
crazy. A photo finish in the Texas NC State game that was happening at the same time as this Duke one tonight. And I mean, it's a big win for Clemson handing Kentucky their first loss of the year. But just so many of these games weren't even close. Pitt's the one ranked team in addition to North Carolina and Duke within the league, and they weren't very competitive at all at Mississippi State.
No, and that's kind of my point as well. There's only going to be one ranked ACC team come next Monday at 1 o'clock when the AP poll gets released, and it's going to be Duke. I can't imagine North Carolina staying in the top 25 after losing to Alabama. After Pitt just gets steamrolled, I can't imagine them staying in the top 25 either. And those were them and Duke were your only ranked teams in the ACC. Now, Clemson, I think maybe you could make an argument that they become ranked. They performed well so far this season. Looking back here in my notes, they're now 8-1. And this weekend, Clemson's going to play Miami. So if you go down to Miami and you get a win, maybe Clemson joins Duke in the top 25. But it's tough sledding right now for the ACC. And you look at a team like Louisville coming up on Sunday for Duke. They really impressed me in the battle for Atlantis. And then in that championship game, they get dealt a couple of bad injury blows that are going to hurt them going forward. And now their rotation is much shorter. Pat Kelsey is still going to do a good job coaching them. He's still going to bring the energy. I'm sure the KFC Yum Center is still going to be sold out, hoping Louisville can get a signature victory early in the tenure for their new head coach. But I think they're just going to be such at a disadvantage now, playing shorthanded with Pryor's injury, who was playing really well. This is a Louisville team that made it to the championship game of the battle for Atlantis, and then they turn around in their ACC, SEC challenge game and get run off the floor by a really good Ole Miss team in Louisville. So obviously they're going to be wanting to bounce back from that. That'll be their second straight loss, losing to Oklahoma in the Battle for Atlantis championship, and then the ACC, SEC challenge loss to Ole Miss, and not easy for them. A stretch of their first two games. I think they played Indiana, West Virginia, Oklahoma in the Battle for Atlantis. Then you play Ole Miss, and now I don't think they have a game in between and now they play Duke. So they're going to want to get the taste of two straight losses out of their mouths. But again, I think it's going to be really tough for this Louisville team given the injuries that they faced. And I think the one good thing for Duke is they've already gone on the road. They already have true road game experience. Now, it's certainly different in conference play with the intensity and the physicality, but having a true road win under your belt against a team like Arizona is certainly going to serve this team well going into the start of ACC play, because if you remember last year, they did not start off very well on the road with a tough loss against Georgia Tech.
Going to be an exciting one. Duke and Louisville on Sunday to open up ACC play. Duke will then have a couple of more non-conference games, and then they'll fully dive into ACC competition with the one kind of random non-con that we've got against Illinois, which will be an exciting game up there at MSG a little bit later in the year. Kevin, so much fun, man. I much prefer these conversations with you following the big games where Duke's on the winning side of things. I know that you've got plenty of coverage within the Ball Durham community as well. How can people support you? Where can they find all that work?
Yeah, come read us every day over at balldurham.com. We got a ton of content on Duke. We'll be filling it up with content between now and Sunday, and then obviously we keep rolling through with conference play and a matchup with Louisville on deck.
Kevin, always appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon, okay?
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Kevin Connelly joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. A reminder, a little bit later today, we'll have that Locked On ACC squad for you within your Locked On Blue Devils feed. Be sure to subscribe to our show. Really appreciate all the support on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to us. Also, make sure that you check us out on YouTube each and every day and subscribe to our channel over there. Big time win for Duke. We absolutely love to see it. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.